Today, we're going to get into a really cool story of chemical innovation. It's about how you can take some pretty simple everyday ingredients, add a little spark of catalytic genius, and end up with something that, well, something that literally glows. Let's dive in and see how they pulled it off.
So, just take a look at this. What you're looking at is chemistry, pure and simple, turning a totally clear solution into this brilliantly glowing one. The big questions are, how is that even possible? And maybe more importantly, why is it such a huge step forward? That's exactly what we're going to break down. Okay, first things first, let's talk about the breakthrough itself. Because to really get why this new method is such a big deal, we need to understand what molecule we're even trying to make and why the old ways of doing it were frankly kind of a pain.
So, meet the stars of our show. 1,4-benzothiazine 2,1s. Yeah, I know, it's a bit of a mouthful. But this specific ring structure, with its nitrogen and sulfur atoms tucked inside, is a real powerhouse in chemistry. You find it as the backbone for molecules in everything from new medicines to advanced materials like organic electronics. They are super useful if you can make them without a huge headache.
And see, that's always been the problem. The old way, well, it often used these things called thiols. And if you've ever been in a chemistry lab, you know thiols are notorious for their awful rotten egg smell. Just terrible. Plus, you needed complicated starting materials and a bunch of different steps, but this new way, it's completely thiol-free, so no more smell. It starts with cheap, readily available chemicals, and it does the whole thing in one single pot. It's cleaner, it's simpler, it's just so much more elegant.
So, how does this clever one-pot reaction actually work its magic? Let's pop the hood and get into the chemistry. We're going to look at the recipe that makes this whole thing possible.
And you know, the recipe is actually surprisingly simple. You just take a basic ketone to provide the carbon framework, an amine called P-N-acididine for the nitrogen, and then plain old elemental sulfur, which is super cheap, abundant, and not toxic. But the real secret ingredient, the thing that brings it all together, is a tiny amount of iodine. It acts as a catalyst, basically the chef that orchestrates the whole reaction at a pretty mild 80 degrees Celsius.
And here it is, the roadmap for how those ingredients all come together. Now, I know this diagram looks a little intense, but don't worry. Think of it as a beautiful dance where two new carbon-sulfur bonds and one carbon-nitrogen bond all get formed in the same flask. We're going to walk right through it step by step.
So, first up, the amine and the elemental sulfur get to know each other. You can see the sulfur atoms attaching to the amine right here. Then, this new combo molecule reacts with the ketone. That reaction kicks out a molecule of water and forms this intermediate called an imine. That's our first major milestone, and we're well on our way.
Okay, now for the really cool part. This is where that iodine catalyst comes into play the hero. Iodine jumps onto the molecule, which activates it. This sets off a cascade of electrons moving around that causes the whole structure to fold in on itself. Look right here as this chain attacks this carbon. And bam! We form that all-important ring structure. This is the key moment where that first carbon-sulfur bond is formed so cleverly.
To wrap things up, the molecule just needs a little bit of a final polish. The solvent itself, DMSO, steps in and does a final oxidation. This just rearranges a few electrons and creates the final, stable product you see here. And notice this, the iodine catalyst gets kicked back out, totally unchanged, ready to go start the whole cycle over again with a new molecule. It's an incredibly efficient system.
And what this slide shows so beautifully is that this recipe isn't just a one-trick pony. The researchers tried it with a whole bunch of different starting ketones, and as you can see, it worked great almost every time. They were able to create a whole diverse library of these valuable molecules, a lot of them with really excellent yields. This proves the method isn't just a fluke, it's a robust, powerful tool.
Okay, so we've made these molecules in a really smart new way. That's cool, but the story gets even better. Now we get to the real payoff, the incredible and slightly weird way that they glow.
This quote from the research paper points to something really special. See, normally when you have fluorescent molecules and you pack them tightly together into a solid, their glow gets weaker or just stops. It's called quenching. But these molecules, they do the exact opposite. They actually shine brightly as a solid powder, which is a super rare and super desirable property. This bizarre behavior has a name, aggregation-induced emission, or AIE for short. Just look at this experiment. On the far right, in a pure solvent, the glow is pretty weak. But as you start adding water, which forces the molecules to clump together to aggregate, the fluorescence just explodes. The solution goes from barely lit to intensely bright. So what on earth is going on here?
Well, it's wonderfully counterintuitive. When the molecules are floating around freely in a solution, they can wiggle and rotate and lose a lot of their energy as heat. But when they get all crowded and forced to clump together, they get locked in place. They can't wiggle anymore. So, with nowhere else for that energy to go, it gets released as brilliant light. It's amazing. They glow because they're crowded.
And this isn't just some cool effect you can only see in a tiny little vial. Nope. The researchers proved this method is practical by making this much, 2.34 grams of the stuff in a single scaled-up run.
This gram-scale reaction right here is the proof in the pudding. It shows the process is robust enough to move from the lab bench to larger-scale production. It's not just a scientific curiosity, it's a genuinely useful way to make these materials for real-world applications.
So, let's zoom out. What's the big picture? We now have an efficient, cleaner, and scalable way to make a whole family of molecules that have this rare and powerful glowing property. This aggregation-induced emission is a total game-changer for things like OLED displays, where you need materials that glow in their solid state, or for bioimaging, where you need probes that stay bright in the crowded environment inside a cell. This new method delivers the exact kinds of molecules needed for those next-gen technologies.
Ultimately, this breakthrough hands scientists a powerful new toolkit, and it leaves us with a really fascinating question. Now that we can custom build these incredible glowing molecules so easily, what new technologies will they light up for us first? The possibilities are, well, as bright as the molecules themselves.